and our policies are yielding results, restoring hope and bringing relief to Ghanaians. Personally, it is heartwarming when a parent runs up to you and says, "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for putting money in my purse." Because she did not have to pay 2,000 cedis for her 2 daughters in SHS. Or when an excited teacher trainee shows you the text message notification of his allowance received. Yet these are just 2 examples, Mr. Speaker, of the promises some said were impossible to fulfill. Mr. Speaker, we resolve to be fiscally disciplined and respect the limits this August House set for us within appropriation. Again, I'm glad to report that we are well on course to end the year with a fiscal deficit of 6.3% from 9.4. In fact, lower than the 6.5% contained in the budget in March. If I may add, Mr. Speaker, this is only the second time in a decade that the government has managed to stay within its budget deficit target. Mr. Speaker, a lot has been achieved by the government of President Nana Akufo-Addo, and we have achieved under 1 year what seemed impossible in 8 years. We have restored macro stability. We have renewed confidence in the economy. We have provided reliable electricity supply. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we have indeed provided reliable electricity supply. And Mr. Speaker, our SHS students have literally forgotten how to spell Dumsor, because Dumsor is dead. We have returned to robust growth with a real GDP growth of 7.8% in the first half of 2017 against 2.7% in 2016. We have reduced inflation, and October inflation of 11.6% from 15.4% in December 2016. We have maintained stability of the cedi against the US dollar. We have brought down the policy rate to 21% from a peak of 26% in 2016. There is more, Mr. Speaker. We have normalized the domestic yield curve, issued the country's maiden 15-year bond in April 2017. We have improved external balances driven by higher export earnings and lower imports. We have improved gross international reserve to 7.2 billion, equivalent to 4.1 months of import cover. The highest, Mr. Speaker, international reserves in the country's history. We have improved primary balance to 0.3% surplus in September 2016 against a deficit of 1.6% in September 2016. We have received positive sovereign rating reviews from international rating agencies, Fitch B stable, Standard & Poor B- positive. We have successfully completed the 4th IMF ECF program review, and we have achieved positive developments in the oil and gas sector, favorable HITLOS ruling, and Sankofa producing first oil 3 months ahead of schedule. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, our commitment is to solidify these gains for as long as we remain managers of the economy, and that may be a long time. To ensure irreversibility, we are implementing the following measures to tackle some of the long-term structural issues: capping of the city refunds at 25% of government tax revenue. Thank you very much for your support. Operationalization of the Treasury single account to consolidate all government funds at the Bank of Ghana. Tightening of expenditure controls in GIFMIS to minimize inefficiencies and budget overruns. Strict enforcement of the PFM Act as well as the Public Procurement Act to ensure efficiency in public procurement. And adoption of the competitive tender process, which is eliminating wastage and giving Ghanaian taxpayers real value for their money. We have successfully refinanced the first tranche of the energy sector legacy debt through the issuance of the first ever energy bond by Esla PLC. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to announce that this successfully raised 4.7 billion Ghana cedis, over $1 billion, and is now the highest ever energy bond in Africa. We have also introduced the cash waterfall mechanism to prevent new debt accumulating. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to report to this August House that after a few months of intense preparation, the Akufo-Addo government has rolled out the destiny-changing free senior high school policy across all public schools. To ensure equal opportunity for every Ghanaian child. Mr. Speaker, we have also rolled out the National Digital Property Addressing System to provide we have launched the National Identification Scheme, and we have indeed restored the teachers and nurses training. And we have indeed restored the teachers and nurses training allowances. Mr. Speaker, this year, we have restored macroeconomic stability, which is protecting the value of money in the pockets of ordinary Ghanaians and giving businesses the predictability and space to plan and invest, thereby sowing the seeds for economic growth and job creation. The broad agenda for next year is to translate the stability achieved into shared growth with aggressive policies aimed at creating more opportunities for jobs. The President is determined to reverse the trend of the last few years where businesses operated merely and mainly to service loans, pay taxes, and electricity bills. In line with this, for 2018, we will continue to stabilize the economy, offer reliefs, including reducing electricity tariffs, to make the private sector truly competitive and create more employment. Our job creation agenda will be driven by investments in human capital, strategic infrastructure, agriculture and agribusiness, entrepreneurship, and innovation programs. Specifically, we will vigorously continue with and heavily invest in our key policy initiatives and flagship projects such as Planting for Food and Jobs, stimulus package for distressed industries, One District, One Factory, Stone Good Development Fund, National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program, Free SHS, National Identification Scheme, and National School Feeding Program. Mr. Speaker, we have prioritized investments in these areas to ensure that we establish a fair and inclusive society which creates life-transforming productive opportunities for every able-bodied Ghanaian. We are confident that these priorities will not only deliver jobs, but will improve the security and well-being of Ghanaians and communities across the country. By A, increasing agricultural growth and development, providing decent work through skill and entrepreneurship development and industrialization, as well as increasing opportunities for all through the provision of quality education and health delivery. Mr. Speaker, our policy priorities for 2018 and beyond promise two vital ingredients for any serious progressive society: opportunity and prosperity. For us, the fight against poverty and unemployment is not optional. It is a national security issue. We intend to pursue this goal of building a society of equal opportunity responsibly by protecting our natural endowments and at the same time adding value to the exploitation of these rich resources under our custody. Given that our President has been honored to co-chair the UN Advocacy Group for the Global Sustainable Development Goals, Ghana is taking a leadership role with this budget in driving this sustainable transformational agenda for the Ghanaian people and also for Africa. Mr. Speaker, for a successful implementation of the SDGs, we need to involve all sectors of society. Let us move beyond this budget cycle and make the SDGs flow through the DNA of Ghanaians in our effort to meet the 2030 targets and the embedded Paris Agreement for climate action. Mr. Speaker, the theme for the 2018 budget is putting Ghana back to work. This theme reflects the tools provided in the 2018 budget to energize the entrepreneurial spirit within every Ghanaian. The job of the Akufo-Addo government is to assist our people with the tools and the environment to go out there to work and earn a decent living and improve their lives. We plan on providing opportunities for as many Ghanaians as possible to initiate projects on their own. Mr. Speaker, it is time for Ghanaians to arise and build. Nehemiah. It is time for all Ghanaians who put their shoulders to the wheel and to speak the same language. Then nothing, Mr. Speaker, will be impossible for us. We must come together in a new partnership of our faith-based institutions, civil society, businesses, and governments to create a powerful locomotive for transformation so that our President's coordinated program of economic and social development policies will create, as the President states, an optimistic, self-confident, and prosperous nation through the creative exploitation of our human and natural resources, and operating within a democratic, open, and fair society in which mutual trust and economic opportunities exist for all. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the budget should not simply be a statement to share the national cake between different groups, but it should capture how I believe the budget should not simply be a statement to divide the national cake between different groups, but it should capture how a nation comes together to meet the challenges of our times and our circumstances. We should understand our shared sociology and values in order to discover a modern view of our Ghanaian citizenship. Mr. Speaker, in August 1950, J.B. Danquah said, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, he said, we had, it will be good to, we had neither excessive means to suffer waste, nor any time to wait. The call to relieve our country and people from a wretched existence is urgent, and our watchword in this urgency for an early answer. Mr. Speaker, we must, as a matter of urgency, create an enterprise culture so that we can transform our newfound stability into productive, industrialized, dynamic, open, and responsible market. A society that eschews poverty of aspirations and with deliberateness celebrates, prepares, and challenges the youth to discover and achieve their full potential. Mr. Speaker, this President seeks to do this in this budget. Mr. Speaker, our prudent management of the economy under the able leadership of our President is yielding positive results. Provisional data on the performance of the economy from January to September 2017 show that nearly all the macroeconomic indicators are on target. Please permit me to provide a summary of these performances. Mr. Speaker, we are returning to a robust growth after 2016 recorded the lowest growth performance in almost 2 decades. The real GDP growth for 2017 is provisionally estimated at 7.9%, of non-oil growth 4.8%. This compares extremely favorably with a real growth target of 6.3% and a 2016 outturn of 3.7%. At the sectorial level, the industry sector recovered from a negative growth of 0.5% and is expected to grow by 17.7% in 2017 due to increased production in upstream oil and gas. Growth in the agriculture subsector is expected to be broad-based despite the initial alarm associated with the army worm invasion. The services sector remains the dominant sector of an estimated share of 55.9%. Inflation. Mr. Speaker, inflation continued to decline in 2017, mainly on account of exchange rate stability, tight monetary policy, and fiscal consolidation. Inflation declined from 15.4% in December to 11.6% in October. Monetary aggregates. Mr. Speaker, Broad money supply grew by 20% in September 2017 on account of growth in the net foreign assets at the Bank of Ghana. This compares with a growth of 22.3% in 2016. Total credit to the private sector and public institutions recorded a growth of 16.8% in September 2017, of which the private sector accounted for 87.9%. Interest rates. Mr. Speaker, interest rates in 2017 continued to decline in response to the gradual improvement in the macroeconomic fundamentals, easing inflation and exchange rate stability. The monetary policy rate was reduced in January 2017 to 21% in July 2017. Similarly, money market rates broadly declined. The average lending rates of banks, however, marginally responded to the downward revision in the BOJ's policy rates and eased to 28.9% in September 2017 from 31.7% in December 2016. Mr. Speaker, the cedi remained relatively stable against the major currencies on account of improved liquidity in the foreign exchange market. As of October 2017, the Ghana cedi accumulatively depreciated by around 4% against the US dollar. Mr. Speaker, the balance of payments recorded a surplus of $379.3 million for the first 3 quarters of 2017, compared with a deficit of $1.3 billion in 2016. This improvement was mainly driven by higher export earnings and private transfers. The gross international reserves as at end October 2017, as I mentioned, stood at $7.2 billion, equivalent to 4.1 months of import cover. This compares to $4.8 billion last year, or 2.5 months of import cover for the same period last year. Mr. Speaker, the thrust of fiscal policy for the 2017 budget was to restore confidence in the economy, ensure fiscal and debt sustainability, and promote overall macroeconomic stability through a number of bold initiatives. Preliminary data for September 2017 indicate that fiscal outturn was broadly in line with expectations despite revenue shortfalls. Total revenue and grants for the period fell short of target by 9.3%, an actual of $28.4 billion against a target of $31.3 billion. While expenditures, including arrear clearance, was constrained by 8.1%, an actual of $37.7 billion against a target of $41 billion. This resulted, Mr. Speaker, in an overall fiscal deficit on cash basis of 4.6% of GDP against a target of 4.8% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, reasons behind the lower than anticipated revenue performance was mainly due to delays in implementation of tax compliance and administrative measures, as well as slow real GDP growth in the non-oil sectors of the economy, particularly the services sector. The real truth. Order. The real truth, Mr. Speaker, is that as Ghanaians, we are impaling ourselves. We are not paying our taxes, and we are helping others to evade taxes. Mr. Speaker, despite the revenue shortfalls, it is encouraging to note that the outturn for the period represents an annual growth of 16.2% compared to 4.1% during the same period in 2016. Mr. Speaker, we manage expenditures were generally controlled to minimize overruns due to the strict usage of GIFMIS, as well as the implementation of quarterly cash allotments to MDAs. We are also seeing a new commitment in public procurements to protect the public purse. Mr. Speaker, the accumulation of expenditure arrears from the previous government remains one of the major challenges Mr. Speaker, one of the major challenges to meet the fiscal objectives of government and the successful implementation of the budget. Given the negative impact of the buildup of arrears in the economy, government committed to an arrears clearance program in line with the IMF arrangement of the government of Ghana. A total amount of 3.2 billion was programmed for clearance in 2017. Of this amount, 2.3 billion was cleared by the end of September 2017. Besides the program stock of arrears, government identified a build-up in outstanding payments and claims which were subjected to audit. Of the total claims audited by the Auditor General of 10 billion, only 50% of the 10 billion were acknowledged. This, Mr. Speaker, was a level of naked abuse that the public purse was made to endure in recent years. Mr. Speaker, we have moved on. The validated claims will be cleared in due time in line with government's macroeconomic program for the medium term. Mr. Speaker, as at end September 2017, GMPC had lifted 6 parcels of crude oil on behalf of the state and transported a total of 20,545 scraps of gas to GNGC, Ghana Gas. Total crude oil lifted was 5.8 million barrels, 3.8 million barrels of Jubilee oil, and 2 million barrels of TEN oil, compared to 2.9 million barrels, all from Jubilee Field, for the same period last year. Receipts from crude oil liftings for the period up to September 2017 accrued from the 35th lifted in December 2016 to the 38th Jubilee liftings, and first also lifted in December 2016 to third 10 liftings, amounting to $339.3 million. Total petroleum receipts as of September 2017 was $362.6 million, compared to the receipts of $172.9 million for the same period in 2016. Mr. Speaker, on the debt stock, I'd like to recall that one of the challenging economic situations that our government inherited was a ballooning debt stock which placed undue burden on the 2017 budget. Indeed, Ghana's debt to GDP ratio had increased from 32% in 2008 to 73% by the end of 2016. This situation resulted in an increase in interest burden, with interest payments alone consuming 45% of tax revenue and 6.8% of GDP. We'll get to that. Our government, through prudent management of the economy, reduction in the fiscal deficit, and a policy of debt reprofiling, has successfully reduced Ghana's debt burden. The debt to GDP ratio has declined from 73% at end December 2016 to 68.3%. That's at the end of September 2017. This is the first time, Mr. Speaker, this is the first time since 2006 that Ghana has witnessed a year-on-year reduction in the debt to GDP ratio. The interest burden of Ghana's debt has also been reduced. Interest payments have reduced from 45% of tax revenue to 43.8% in September 2017, with a 41.9% reduction at the end of 2017. Mr. Speaker, it's important to note that the annual average rate of debt accumulation of 36% over the last 4 years has declined over the last 9 months from 36 average rate increase to 13.6%. This, Mr. Speaker, again, is the lowest annual public debt over the last decade. This, Mr. Speaker, is the lowest annual increase in the public debt over the last decade. Mr. Speaker, our prudent debt management has therefore improved the debt outlook and debt sustainability for Ghana. We will continue to keep the public debt in check and move purposefully away from the unbridled borrow and spend culture of the previous 8 years. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the 2018 to 2021 budget is informed by the President's coordinated program for economic and social development policies, which aims at creating a conducive environment for the private sector to thrive, propel growth, and create employment opportunities, especially for the youth. In this regard, government's policy objectives for the medium term will aim at stabilizing the economy and setting it on a path of sustained, diversified, and resilient growth. Optimizing the key sources of growth in the economy on a sustainable basis, enhancing a competitive and enabling business environment for private sector-led growth, formalizing the informal sector, building a strong and resilient economy able to withstand internal and external shocks, promoting agro-industrial enterprises as the basis for the One District, One Factory initiative, and creating entrepreneurial and employment opportunities, especially for the youth. Mr. Speaker, consistent with our medium-term development policy framework, we have set the following macroeconomic targets for the medium term, 2018 to 2021. Real GDP to grow at an average rate of 6.2% between 2018 and 2020. Inflation to stay within the target band of 8 plus or minus 2%. Overall fiscal deficit to remain within the fiscal rule of 3 to 5%. Primary balance expected to improve from a surplus of 0.2% of GDP and remain around 2% in the medium term, and gross international reserves to cover at least 4 months of imports. Mr. Speaker, based on our policy objective of ensuring macroeconomic stability and growing the economy for job creation whilst protecting social spending, the following macroeconomic targets are set for the 2018 fiscal year. Overall GDP growth rate of 6.8%, non-oil GDP growth rate of 5.4%, end period inflation rate of 8.9%, fiscal deficit of not 3.8%, fiscal deficit of 4.5%. Primary surplus of 1.6% of GDP, and gross foreign assets to cover at least 3.5 months of imports of goods and services. Fiscal sector 2018. Mr. Speaker, moving into 2018, our fiscal program is firmly anchored on the ongoing fiscal consolidation. Our prime focus is to ensure that the fiscal deficit, which remains our principal fiscal anchor, is programmed to decline to 4.5% of GDP from the projected 2017 end-year estimate of 6.3%. Over the medium term, the fiscal deficit is expected to stabilize around 3 to 5% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, achieving this objective is not only critical but necessary if we are to maintain the healthy primary balance surplus required to eventually reduce the rate of debt accumulation. However, some critical issues must be addressed in the process. Domestically, we are faced with rising expenditures over the short to medium term as we invest more in programs that will stimulate economic growth and generate jobs. We will therefore need to boost domestic revenue through innovative channels that will not place undue burden on the entire populace. Mr. Speaker, we must make these decisions in good time to ensure that our future generation will be equipped with a priceless inheritance of a sustainable fiscal environment. For as the saying goes, let us build a roof before it rains. We are studying all the available feasible options carefully. In this vein, optimizing resource mobilization through improved tax compliance and efficient and effective revenue administration remains an important part of our fiscal strategy to boost domestic revenue mobilization for 2018 and the medium term. Consequently, in addition to empowering the Ghana Revenue Authority to bring to book tax evaders, we are equally investing in programs and infrastructure to widen the tax net. This will include the implementation and rollout of a national digital address system to help us track taxpayers, especially in the informal sector, an acceleration of the implementation of the National ID program, deployment of electronic point-of-sale devices to ensure that vendors are not under-declaring VAT, and special audits, among others. At the same time, this budget also takes bold steps to start mobilizing revenue by making concrete changes in the tax policy framework, especially in tax exemptions. At the appropriate time, we'll return to this August House with our proposed legislative amendments to pave the way for the execution of our programs. Other tax measures being considered for the 2018 fiscal year include review of the suspense regimes, implementation of the excise tax stamp policy, extension of the requirement to produce tax clearance certificates for large private sector contracts, and improving property rate collection. Mr. Speaker, on the expenditure front, we have shown our commitment to eliminate expenditure overruns and will remain committed to continue with the design and implementation of the public financial management reforms with the aim of eliminating inefficient and ineffective allocation of resources. Mr. Speaker, currently, the wage bill poses the single major risk to our budget implementation. The entire human resource personnel management is within the public service will need to be revisited. We'll be considering our options carefully within the broader framework of the new public sector reform strategy. We'll have to streamline gift myths. We'll have to strengthen and enforce commitment controls. We'll need some payroll reforms. Mr. Speaker, these reforms will generate fiscal space to support priority spending programs, boost growth, improve the societal welfare of our citizenry, and guarantee the achievement of our goal of debt sustainability. Mr. Speaker, total revenue and grants for 2017 fiscal year has been conservatively estimated at 51 billion based on our projection of the level of economic activity, government policy on taxation and donor grant disbursements. Mr. Speaker, total receipts from upstream petroleum activities amount to 3.2 billion Ghana cedis, estimated at 6.2% of total revenue and grants. This is about 1.3% of GDP and represents a per annum growth of 24.8% over the 2017 projected outturn. Domestic revenue is estimated at 50.5 billion, representing an annual growth of 26.9%. Mr. Speaker, non-tax revenue is estimated at 8 billion, equivalent to 3.3% of GDP. Of this amount, internally generated funds to be retained by IGF-generating institutions amount to 3.8 billion. Mr. Speaker, revenue inflows from the energy sector levies, specifically the Energy Debt Recovery Levy and the Price Stabilization Levy, is estimated at 2.1 billion. These inflows are reported for transparency purposes. They are not intended for budget utilization. Mr. Speaker, grants from development partners mainly in support of projects are estimated at 586.8 million, equivalent to 0.2% of GDP. We do not expect to receive any program grants. Mr. Speaker, it's important to note that as a lower middle income country, these donor resources will seize of time, emphasizing the urgent need to boost domestic revenue mobilization. Mr. Speaker, total expenditure, including provision made for the clearance of arrears, is estimated at 62 billion, equivalent to 25.7% of GDP. The estimated expenditure for the year represents an annual growth of 14.5%. Mr. Speaker, compensation of employees, which continues to represent the single largest item of government expenditure, is estimated at 19.6 billion, 8.1% of GDP. Of this amount, 16.8 billion, Mr. Speaker, equivalent to 6.9% of GDP, has been provisioned for wages and salaries alone. Expenditure on goods and services is estimated at 3.5 billion, representing 1.5% of GDP. The annual growth of 66.9% reflects a full provision made to cater for the government's priority programs, including the flagship Free SHS policy, which enters its second year of implementation in 2018. Mr. Speaker, the debt reprofiling exercise is having positive impact on interest payments. Interest payments are estimated at 14.9 billion, 6.2% of GDP. Of this amount, domestic interest payment constitutes about 82%. As we consolidate our public finances, the annual growth of domestic interest payments is expected to decline considerably. Mr. Speaker, transfers to statutory funds, as well as all other earmarked funds, which are backed by the relevant laws, are estimated at 12.1 billion Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, the object of the statutory funds is to provide secure funding to implement critical programs and projects in the relevant sectors. Over the years, these sectors have been exerting a lot of pressure on the limited available resources despite allocations to the statutory funds. In consonance with the PFM Act 2016 Act 921 and Earmarked Funds Capping and Realignment Act, the earmarked funds will be realigned to national priorities. Mr. Speaker, allocations for development capital expenditure is 6.9 billion. Of this amount, domestically financed capital expenditure is estimated at 3.3 billion, or 1.4% of GDP. This represents an annual growth of about 219%. An amount of 3.6 billion has been budgeted from foreign finance capital expenditure, and this will be funded by a combination of donor project grants and project loans. Overall budget balance and financing for 2018. Mr. Speaker, based on the estimates for total revenue and grants and total expenditures, the 2018 budget will result in an overall budget deficit of 10.9 billion Ghana cedis, equivalent to 4.5% of GDP. Financing of the fiscal deficit will be from domestic and foreign sources. Net foreign financing will amount to about $3 billion, including a Euro bond of up to $1 billion, equivalent to 1.2% of GDP. Net domestic financing will constitute about 73% of total financing and includes financing from bank and non-bank sectors. Other domestic sources, such as divestiture proceeds and mineral royalty prepayments. The total NDF is estimated at $8 billion, or 3.3% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, it is worth noting that in 2018, the primary balance, which is an indication of our fiscal effort, will be grown to a larger surplus of about 1.6% of GDP from projected 2017 outturn of 0.2%. This signifies our resolve to breaking the back of a growing public debt from previous years. Mr. Speaker, the projected benchmark crude oil price for 2018 is $57.4 per barrel, with a benchmark output of 53.25 million barrels. Similarly, the gas price for 2018 is projected at 3.94 per million scf, up from 2017 estimate of $3.03. This includes gas prices of Jubilee, TEN, as well as Sankofa. The total petroleum revenue for 2018 is estimated at $669.4 million, with benchmark revenue projected at $335.86 million. Mr. Speaker, in line of Section 23(3) of the PRMA, we propose to this august House to cap the Ghana Stabilization Fund at $300 million. The reason for the capping is to use the excess amount over the cap to retire existing debt in line with the law. Mr. Speaker.
Order.
If you will permit me,
Order.
I will now present highlights of the performance for 2017 and outlook for 2018 for some of the parts of the economy. Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, our flagship Planting for Food and Jobs has been a tremendous success. The PFJ recruited 2160 university graduates and 1070 youths to register and provide extension services to farmers across the country. To date, 200 Mr. Speaker,
Order.
Our flagship Planting for Food and Jobs program has been a tremendous success. The PFJ recruited 2,160 university graduates and 1,070 youth to register and provide essential services to farmers across the country. To date, 201,000 farmers have been registered. In addition, 121,000 metric tons of subsidized fertilizer and 4,400 metric tons of subsidized seeds and cereal, legumes, and vegetables have been distributed to beneficiary farmers. The program also registers suppliers to distribute farm produce to public institutions across the school feeding program, the free senior high school program, prisons, defense and police, among others, to ensure availability of quality food in a timely manner in these institutions. The National Buffer Stock Company was revitalized to procure, store, and distribute the outputs from the Planting for Food and Jobs and other programs of the ministry. The company, in collaboration with the Agriculture Development Bank, registered 553 licensed buying companies. The invasion of the fall army worm, Mr. Speaker, was managed through distribution of chemicals to farmers, recruitment of spraying gangs, and monitoring and surveillance. This intervention recovered 123,000 hectares of farmlands out of 137. A strategic stock of insecticide and other logistics will be built to ensure ready availability of chemicals during outbreaks, as well as intensification of monitoring and surveillance. In 2018, to improve livelihood of livestock farmers in all 10 regions and increase meat production, 2,000 livestock farmers will be supported with 70,000 small ruminants. The ministry will also support 6 national livestock breeding stations to produce and distribute 200 cross-bred heifers, 1,700 improved pigs, and 100,000 cockerels. To promote agricultural mechanization, 220 tractors and accessories comprising 141 maize shellers and 77 multi-crop threshers were distributed to farmers and service providers. In 2018, the ministry will distribute 200 tractors and marching implements, 1,000 power tillers and walking tractors, 30 tractor-mounted reapers, 10 tractor-drawn rear blade, 10 tractor-mounted slasher, 60 boom and orchard sprayers, 4,000 motorized sprayers, 60 mechanical and pneumatic planters, 50 cereal harvesters, 200 multi-crop threshers, 400 irrigation kits, and 100 greenhouse technology for horticulture production. The ministry, in collaboration with Ghana Irrigation Development Authority, completed a rehabilitation of the Impromen Dam and continued works on Tammany Phase 1 headworks. Stakpe, Zapalsi, Konokli, Yuasi, which are at various stages of completion. To facilitate the provision of community-owned and managed small-scale irrigation facilities, especially in northern Ghana, the ministry identified 192 small dams and dugouts in 64 districts for development under the One Village, One Dam initiative beginning in 2018. In addition, 30 pumping schemes and 100 boreholes will be developed and a feasibility study conducted for water transmission lines in northern Ghana. Mr. Speaker, the $1.8 billion syndicated loan used in purchasing 969,000 been repaid. For the 2017-18 season, an amount of $1.3 billion has been raised to purchase a projected crop of 850,000 tons. The average FOB price of cocoa in the past season witnessed a 30% decline from $2,950 to $2,080. This situation compelled other countries to reduce their producer prices of cocoa. Mr. Speaker, the Akufo-Addo government, however, maintained the producer price of cocoa at Ghana cedis 7,600 per ton to minimize the harsh effects this decline in international cocoa price could have on the earnings of hard-working cocoa farmers. This price reflects 88.6% of the net FOB price, a clear demonstration of this government's commitment to enhance the welfare of cocoa farmers. Government will initiate an inducement package to take care of bottlenecks in the customary land tenure system While government remains committed to improving road infrastructure in cocoa growing areas, there's a value for money audit to ensure that taxpayers' monies are used judiciously and efficiently. Cocoa Board, Mr. Speaker, over the past 3 years, awarded road contracts to an incredible amount of 5.1 billion Ghana cedis. Against a budget of 1.6 billion, resulting in excess expenditure of over 3.5 billion Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, as part of measures to promote industrialization and to shield us from falling cocoa prices, government modified incentives to increase processing of cocoa in Ghana through progressive discounts that incentivize tertiary processing. Thus, Mr. Speaker, raising value addition to cocoa and creating jobs. Mr. Speaker, our Cocoa Board is also in discussions with Côte d'Ivoire to begin to look at a program of managing our shared products and also looking at commodities exchange in our country. Mr. Speaker, the education sector. The education sector strategy will be guided by Global Education 2030 Agenda and targets, defined by Sustainable Development Goal 4, to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education for all and promote lifelong learning. The broad sector policy thrust for education is sustainable and efficient management of education service delivery will focus on teacher development and accountability, improve quality of teaching and learning at all levels, inclusive and equitable access to at all levels, skills development and training for employability through quality TVET, and strengthen mathematics, science, ICT, and technology education. Basic education curriculum reforms. To improve the quality of basic education and equip the Ghanaian child with basic literacy, numeracy, and critical thinking skills, the Ministry of Education commenced the process for the review of the basic level curriculum to emphasize the 4 R's of reading, writing, arithmetic, and creativity. In 2018, the Ministry will complete the curriculum reforms and define national pupil standards in literacy, numeracy, and creativity. In addition, the Common National Assessment System will be implemented to measure pupil achievements against set benchmarks. In accordance with Education Act 778, government is implementing measures to ensure continuous professional development of teachers through registration and licensing of teachers under the pre-tertiary teacher professional development and management scheme. The pre-tertiary bill approved by Cabinet proposes the devolution of the management of basic schools to the assemblies and management of senior high schools at Ghana Education Service and Ministry of Education headquarters. In 2018, the bill will be laid before Parliament. The number of basic schools, both public and private, increased at all levels. KGs increased by 5.4%, primary 5.4%, and junior high school 7% between 2015 and 2016 and 2016 and 2017 academic years. Capitation grant. In fulfillment of government's promise to make basic education free and ensure participation by all, the capitation grant was increased by 100% from 4 cedis 50 pesos per capita to 9 cedis in 2017. Mr. Speaker, it is worth stressing that this increase by the Akufo-Addo government was the first ever increase in the capitation grant since 2009. Meaning, in all the 8 years that our dear friends, our Social Democrats, were in office, I'm happy to further announce that there will be a further increase to 10 cedis in 2018 under this government. BEC subsidy. Government absorbed 70% of the 2017 BEC registration fees as subsidies for all registered candidates in both public and private JHS. In 2018, government will absorb 100% BEC registration fees for registered candidates from public junior high schools. The ministry will next year begin the infrastructural works towards the introduction of the basic science, technology, engineering, and mathematics BSTEM program in all basic schools. This initiative is intended to strengthen the foundational skills and generate interest in mathematics, science, and technology. This will involve the provision of equipment to over 38,000 public basic schools, training over 38,000 basic school teachers in the delivery of BSTEM, and establishment of 10 well-equipped regional BSTEM centers. TVET reforms to the alignment of public TVET institutions under the Ministry of Education will continue in 2018. The reforms will include developing occupational standards, training of facilitators and assessors, and strengthening competency-based training. Teacher training allowance. Government restored the teacher training allowance covering over 49,000 teacher trainees from 41 public colleges of education for 2017-2018. In addition, funds were released for the payment of outstanding feeding grants to all public colleges of education for the 2015 and 2017 academic year. In the 2018-2019 year, a projected number of over 52,000 teacher trainees will benefit from the allowances. A report was submitted for the enactment of a law to establish a unified commission for tertiary education to deal with policy formulation, implementation, and accreditation, among others. In 2018, the Ministry will begin implementing recommendations that will reform university accreditation and affiliation policies towards introducing equity and fairness in the setting up of public and private universities. Health. Government paid 600 million out of the total government indebtedness to National Health Insurance Scheme, and this has improved funding and smooth running of hospitals. In line with government's commitment to revive NHIS, the ministry set up technical teams to review recommendations of the NHIS review report. In the area of infrastructure, construction of classroom blocks for health training institutions at Sampa, Asankrangwa, Pantang, and Kolobu Critical Care and Peri-Operative Unit was completed in 2017. The following projects are also at various stages of completion. 4 district hospitals, namely Kumau, Fomena, Abetifi, and Takrady European Hospital. Tamale Teaching Hospital Phase 2, 2 regional and 6 district hospitals at Wa, Sewa, Salaga, Konongo, Tepa, Nkoko, Atomic, and Chifopraso. 10 polyclinics at Bisiasi, Gomoa, Rampong, Bimpong, Ija, Ekunfi Nakwa, Esisunkwa, Brewa, Ekunfudi, Drama, Mankrong, and Poston, all in the central region. 5 polyclinics at Oduman, Segi, Botiano, Ashiaman, and Adenta in the Greater Accra region. The number of institutional material The number of institutional maternal deaths per 100,000 live births reduced from 167.5 in June 2016 to 149.7 in June 2017. However, institutional infant mortality per 1,000 births increased from 5.8 to 7.5. Mr. Speaker, Sector challenges affected the purchase of vaccines, resulting in lower than targeted immunization coverage in the first half of 2017. In 2018, the Ministry will continue to address the vaccines challenges that the country has faced over the last 8 years and develop a clear, sustainable plan for vaccines, antiretroviral medicines in anticipation of our exit from Gavi. Mr. Speaker, the focus of health sector activities in 2018 will be directed at reducing morbidity and mortality, especially maternal and neonatal, and improving the quality of life. This will be achieved by increasing access to quality health services and improving efficiency in the governance and management of the health delivery system. In 2018, government will explore the possibility of weaning selected health agencies of government subvention. In addition, the ministry, in collaboration with other stakeholders, will develop medical tourism policy. Mr. Speaker, in the fight against corruption, the Office of Special Prosecutor's Bill was just yesterday passed by this august House. This is a significant move in the overwhelming national desire to combat corruption. In 2018, the Office of the Attorney General's Department will operationalize the Office of the Special Prosecutor, review all agreements for MDAs and MMDAs with the aim to secure successful convictions in the vast majority of cases referred to the office by the police. Mr. Speaker, at the heart of our government's vision for Ghana is Ghana Beyond Aid. We are committed to pursuing this agenda for inclusive growth by implementing strategies, policies, and programs to grow our economy and promote the creation of good jobs at a much faster pace than ever before. Mr. Speaker, to this end, we envision a Ghana Beyond Aid, where government and the people of Ghana take full ownership and responsibility for the nation's economic growth and transformation in a new partnership with our development partners. Mr. Speaker, while we greatly appreciate and will continue to welcome assistance from our external development partners, we envisage a new partnership where development assistance is targeted and strategically aligned with our national growth and economic transformation priorities, where domestic resource mobilization is enhanced through higher private savings and higher government revenues raised in a more efficient and equitable manner, where there is resolute efficiency and accountability in the use of all public resources by government, including resources from external partners, where strong support is given to the private sector, both domestic and foreign, to drive economic growth and job creation, and where our engagement with external partners transitions from one based on aid to one increasingly based on trade and strategic political cooperation. Mr. Speaker, we envision a Ghana Beyond Aid where within a generation, Ghana, through rapid and inclusive growth that respects gender equity, safeguards the environment, and mitigates climate risk exposure, has attained upper middle income status. This will be a Ghana where each child has the opportunity to graduate from at least a senior secondary school or polytechnic and be equipped with the skills to succeed in the modern workplace. A Ghana of an economy based on transformed and highly productive agriculture, a dynamic and competitive manufacturing sector, and high-value services that provide productive employment opportunities for all our young people entering the job market. A Ghana where no one has to go hungry and everyone has access to the necessities of life, including good health care, water, and sanitation in line with the SDG goals. A Ghana that provides reliable and affordable supply of infrastructure, especially power. A Ghana that is a hub for manufacturing, airline services, financial services, education, health, and other high-value modern services. A Ghana that is the preferred location for international businesses that are operating in mutually beneficial linkages with vibrant local businesses and servicing the rest of Africa and the global market. Mr. Speaker, we can do this and we will do this. Mr. Speaker, I have every confidence that of all of us working together under the President's leadership, we can march forward to a Ghana beyond aid in a new, more mature and mutually beneficial relationships with everyone and advance towards our national vision of building an optimistic, self-confident society. Policy initiatives. Mr. Speaker, government made a commitment in the 2017 budget statement and economic policy to structurally transform the economy through investment in agriculture, development of strategic infrastructure, investment in human capital, and a deliberate push towards industrialization with active private sector involvement to create jobs and wealth and improve incomes, thereby improving the standard of living of the Ghanaian. Mr. Speaker, to achieve this transformation, we'll continue with the implementation of our flagship programs and initiatives commenced in 2017 and also outline new initiatives for implementation in 2018. Mr. Speaker, government promised in the 2017 budget to remove some taxes to free additional capital for businesses and provide relief to consumers. In line with this, the taxes, as you know, were duly abolished. Mr. Speaker, the 1% special import levy imposed on imported raw materials was effected. 17.5% VAT for financial services and airline were also effected. Levies imposed on KIA by local authorities were removed. Special petroleum tax reduced from 17.5 to 15. Others include exemption from tax gains from realization of securities listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange for a period of 5 years. The following tax measures were also implemented. As part of measures to streamline tax exemptions, government piloted a refund policy based on the lessons learned. Structures including a paperless system was implemented for granting and monitoring tax exemptions. Government in 2018 will introduce a comprehensive policy on the tax exemptions regime. The Fiscal Electronic Device Bill was laid before Parliament and the excise tax stamp policy was launched. Paperless port system. To improve efficiency at the ports, the ministry introduced paperless transactions at the ports. The implementation of the paperless system significantly reduced transaction time from 2 days to 8 hours of compliant transactions, while revenue from the port increased by 35.4%. Mr. Speaker, government resolved in 2017 to address the challenges in the financial sector to enable strong private sector credit growth. In this regard, the Bank of Ghana addressed the challenge that UT Bank and Capital Bank pose to the entire banking system by facilitating a purchase and assumption agreement by GCB Bank. This intervention was made with a clear policy intent to protect the deposit public and prevent any contagion effect on the entire industry. The government is proud to announce that despite the failure of these two banks in 2017, the confidence and trust in the financial sector remains strong. The Bank of Ghana increased the minimum capital requirement of universal banks from 120 million to 400 million, and all such banks have up to December 2018 to meet the minimum capital requirements. This was done to ensure that these banks have more capacity to lend to businesses, especially within the purview of their single obligor limits, which the Bank of Ghana must enforce strictly. Mr. Speaker, government streamlined ESLA flows to accommodate all the existing legacy debts owed by the energy sector firms to banks and suppliers, and took steps in issuing a successful ESLA-backed bond to pay all these debts. This initiative is important in resolving the liquidity challenges faced by the banks and will enable stronger credit to the private sector, especially as banks' non-performing loans improve. Government also prepared the payment systems and electronic transfer bills to support transition from cash dominant to cash light economy. In 2018, this bill will be laid before Parliament. IPEP, Infrastructure for Poverty Eradication Program. Government introduced the IPEP to direct capital expenditure towards local constituency level, specific infrastructure and economic development priorities, with particular emphasis on rural and deprived communities. In this regard, the Ministry of Special Development Initiatives was created to provide oversight and strategic direction for the implementation of IPEP. IPEP projects were selected through standardized guidelines in the categories provided below: One Village, One Dam, small business development, agriculture input including equipment, water for all projects, and sanitation projects. A 10-member regional team was constituted for each of the 10 regions to oversee the implementation of the IPEP. The teams conducted constituency infrastructure needs assessment to identify projects in all 275 constituencies that are consistent with government priority areas. The law establishing the 3 development authorities, namely Northern Development Authority, Middle Belt Development Authority, and Coastal Development Authority, has been passed by this Parliament, and we thank you. In addition, Parliament also passed a law establishing the Zongo Development Fund, and this has been funded in the 2018 budget. Industrializing Ghana from the ground up. One district, one factory. One District, One Factory program was launched by the President on 25th August 2017. The Ministry of Trade and Industry completed technical, financial, and commercial viability analysis of 462 proposals, out of which 191, covering 102 districts, were selected for implementation. It is envisaged that these 191 district enterprise projects will collectively generate over 250,000 direct and indirect jobs. 191 projects have been appraised and selected for implementation. 104 of these companies will be operating in the agribusiness sector, 20 in the meat and poultry sector, 40 in the construction and building materials subsector, and the remaining 27 businesses in the cosmetics and pharmaceutical sectors. The regional breakdown of the companies 35 in Ashanti, 19 in Brown Hartford, 21 in Central, 34 in Eastern, 28 in Greater Accra, 17 in Northern, 4 in Upper East, 5 in Upper West, 10 in Western, and 18 in Volta. In 2018, government of the 1D1F. By this, challenging the local authorities in the various districts together with the private sector to take full advantage of these funds. A stimulus program was designed to support viable existing local companies that are currently distressed or are facing operational challenges but are deemed viable. To date, over 350 applications from business operators have been received. Out of it, 80 were assessed to be eligible for support in the first phase of the program. The second phase will involve the provision of a stimulus package consisting of technical and financial support to these eligible companies. These beneficiary firms operate in the following sectors, including agribusiness, chemicals and pharmaceuticals, electrical and electronics, garment and textiles, building materials, plastics and packaging, and services. Building an entrepreneurial nation. Government engaged a private sector implementation partner to manage a $10 million US National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program, NEIP, and to raise additional funding from the private sector. This program was launched by the President on 25th August 2017. The Ministry for Special Development Initiatives advertised and received 5,500 applications from young Ghanaian entrepreneurs. These applications are being vetted, and successful entrepreneurs will receive business advisory services. About 500 of these will receive financial support in addition. Each enterprise will employ a minimum of 12 people. Mr. Speaker, government implemented the much-awaited National Digital Addressing System on October 18, 2017 to help formalize the economy. In 2018, government through Ghana Post will develop postal codes to feed into the National Identification System. About 4,000 national service personnel will be engaged to emboss digital addresses on all landed properties nationwide. 4,000 jobs, Mr. Speaker, will be created in this area. National Identification Program. Mr. Speaker, after 8 long years of inaction, the National Identification Program was revived, and on 15 September 2017, the first Ghana card was issued to His Excellency the President. The National Identification Authority will commence issuing the Ghana card after the amendment of the National Identification Authority Act 2006, Act 707, and subsequent passage of the relevant legislative instrument. It will be the first ever multi-purpose card issued in Ghana to support government's efforts of formalizing the economy. Care is being taken to ensure coordination with all other related identification initiatives to prevent waste of resources and maximize government's investment. Mr. Speaker, measures were put in place to strengthen commitment controls and ensure that expenditures match revenue inflows to sanitize public expenditure management. Government is committed to enforcing the PFM Act. To this end, draft regulations to operationalize PFM are being finalized and will be presented to this August House in 2018. Mr. Speaker, the next phase of the TSA implementation will be to extend the transfer of Government of Ghana's bank accounts or commercial banks to cover donor funds of MDAs, as well as the bank accounts of subvented agencies such as universities and other institutions. This will be an important step for consideration in view of managing government's cash position efficiently. Mr. Speaker, a maiden 15-year domestic bond was issued to lengthen the maturity profile of public debt. The domestic debt reprofiling exercise, which contributed to improving the debt mix and lower domestic interest payments, will be continued. And the next phase of the liability management program will include external debt reprofiling based on market conditions, issuance of Eurobonds and use of some of the proceeds for reprofiling more expensive domestic debt, creation of benchmark domestic bonds through tap-ins rather than new issuance. This will improve secondary market trading, improving liquidity and reducing yields on the domestic market. Exploring the opportunity to deepen domestic market by making domestic bond more tradable on the international market. Mr. Speaker, as we are all aware, a major source of corruption has been with malfeasance in public procurement and the extensive human interface in the provision of public services. In this regard, a number of major interventions have been undertaken, including but not limited to the following: enhance oversight responsibility for public procurement with appointment of a Minister of State for Public Procurement, the introduction of e-procurement by the Public Procurement Authority, implementation of a paperless system at ports, implementation of smart vehicle registration and driver's license by DVLA, enhanced investigation of corruption in the public service by the Office of the Auditor General, EOCO, National Security, and other state investigative institutions. Methodical and thorough investigations are being conducted to avoid claims of witch hunting. The Office of the Special Prosecutor is getting ready to crack the whip of justice. Mr. Speaker, infrastructure development and job creation. Mr. Speaker, the Akufo-Addo program for economic transportation is a three-pronged economic development program that would accelerate investments in agriculture, strategic infrastructure, and industrialization. Under the program, we will modernize agriculture, improve production efficiency, achieve food security, and increase profitability for our farmers. The plan is to invest in the entire agriculture and agribusiness value chain, which will create new businesses and job opportunities in the sector. Mr. Speaker, government will also invest in infrastructure that supports the opening up of the major agricultural zones of the country, in energy and related infrastructure to accelerate the industrialization agenda of government. Significant investments will be made in the road and rail sectors of the economy to facilitate trade and the investment of goods and people. The Akufo-Addo program for economic transportation will abolish duties on some agricultural produce, processing equipment and machinery, support the development of agribusiness startups, provide a 400 million fund to de-risk agriculture and agribusiness sector through sustainable agriculture financing and crop insurance schemes, provide 400 million fund to de-risk agriculture, increase the pace of agricultural mechanization, provide specific technical assistance and tax incentives to support agro-processing, packaging, and market assets. Launch a major pension scheme for cocoa farmers. Ramp up investments under the Planting for Food and Jobs. Develop modern storage facilities through the One District, One Warehouse program. Implement a grant funding facility for agribusiness startups. Launch the commodities exchange. And open up key food basket loans through road construction and irrigation projects. Over the next 3 years, the following roads and bridges will be constructed. Arian Kwanta Obwase, Ninahin Awiseso, Ninahin Chechere, Suponi Rails, Ekutuase, Kadoase, Akwase, Kasotia Junction, Wulugu Pasenkuwa, Laura Hantumu, Nandon Hamele, Tamale Karaga Kushiagu, Bumburugu, Nalarego, Chefu Praso, Dunkwa Onofin, Enkoko Niwa Brim, Ofuase Akemoda, Elubu Asemkro Enchi, Kasekro Madiambra, Penakro Futo, Aquacro Mamisano, Avehohoi, Tamale Solaga, Enquanta Damango, Atabubu Kwame, Confuanoche Bepai, Tamale 0.7 interchange, Swame interchange, PTC interchange, Aboya Bridge, Yape Bridge, Wape Bridge, Laura Dekwe Bridge, Primamiswa Bridge, and 99. And, Mr. Speaker, 99 steel bridges. Mr. Speaker, 99 steel bridges. Mr. Speaker, in line with our public investment management policy, we will develop the public investment management reform strategy and action plan and establish a functional public investment management system. In furtherance of this, government will enhance the role of the private sector in the provision of the infrastructure through PPPs. A new PPP bill has been prepared and will be submitted to Cabinet for approval, and once passed by Parliament, it will be followed by the relevant regulations. In the interim, government has attracted investor interest in the rail sector. The Western Rail Line Takoradi to Kumasi, the Eastern Rail Line Accra to Kumasi, the Central Rail Line Kumasi to Paga, Accra City Rail, Kumasi City Rail, Hualugu Multi-Purpose Dam and Solar Hybrid Project, Accra Kumasi Highway, Volta Lake Transportation Project. And Mr. Speaker, an integrated bauxite and aluminium development project with aluminium refineries at Ninahin and Chebi. Mr. Speaker, we are introducing a Nation Builders Corps. A Nation Builders Corps. Mr. Speaker, the most critical economic problem of our time is youth unemployment, and in particular, graduate unemployment. Available data from ISA in March 2017 revealed that only 10% of graduates find jobs after their national service, and it can take up to 10 years for a large number of graduates to secure employment. This is due to varied challenges that range from the lack of employable skills, unavailability of funding capital for entrepreneurship, as well as low capacity of industry to absorb the huge numbers. We must, Mr. Speaker, reverse this trend. Mr. Speaker, we note that several transition programs run under the various government institutions and agencies, including the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, the National Vocational and Technical Institute, Council for Technical and Vocational Education and Training, COTVET, Youth Enterprises Support, and the Youth Employment Authority have targeted non-tertiary graduates. With this background, our government is proposing a new jobs program, the Nation Builders Corps, to focus on graduate unemployment. The Nation Builders Corps program will be a major government initiative to address livelihood empowerment and graduate unemployment to solve economic and social problems. The focus of the initiative will be solving public service delivery in health, education, agriculture, sanitation, and drive revenue mobilization and collection at GRA. The objective of this program will be to provide employment, improve skills and employability, improve public service delivery, improve government revenue mobilization. Under the Nation's Builders Corps program, graduates will be trained, equipped with the necessary work tools, and deployed around the country to be engaged as graduate teachers in a Teach Ghana program focused on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and other relevant subjects in primary and secondary schools across the country. Sanitation inspectors in a Clean Ghana program focused on enforcing sanitation laws and inspection to ensure clean communities. Trained nurses and other healthcare workers in a Heal Ghana program that will provide healthcare delivery to deprived and rural communities across Ghana. Trained agriculture, extension, and other allied workers in a Feed Ghana program that will provide extensive support to farmers across agricultural value chains. Tertiary graduates in a Revenue Ghana program will mobilize the youth to collect taxes that have been difficult to mobilize and enforce collection for the development of Ghana. Mr. Speaker, the Nation Builders Corps program will hire 100,000 graduates in 2018 to be 100,000 graduates in 2018. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we are confronted, Mr. Speaker, with only 10% of our graduates finding jobs, and it taking sometimes over 10 years for them to be placed in secure employment. Mr. Speaker, the Nation Builders Corps will make a significant dent in hiring 100,000 graduates in 2018 to be posted in these various areas. It will be housed under the Office of the President as a special initiative. Mr. Speaker, our faith-based organizations of all religions are a significant part of our economic and social construct. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, across the length and breadth of our country, our faith-based institutions have more than 30,000 branch network. They have more visible presence than any state institution. Every hamlet has a faith-based institution of one form or the other. It is our considered view, Mr. Speaker, that engaging the faith-based institutions in viable economic ventures, teaming up the faith-based institutions with the business community and government to create economic ventures will be an effective way to expedite business development and job creation, especially for the youth. Mr. Speaker, faith-based institutions have the most effective transmission mechanism to reach into every corner of our society, and it is unfortunate that government has not taken time to come into a partnership with them to deliver critical social services in education, health and water, but also to support provision of skills, entrepreneurial training for the youth, and the establishment of commercial enterprises. Mr. Speaker, we are confident that this new paradigm will yield incredible results with regards to social services and also the promotion of enterprises in the various districts in our country. Mr. Speaker, energy sector policy initiatives. Mr. Speaker, we have all too soon forgotten how the menace of Dumsor Mr. Speaker, we have all too soon forgotten how the menace of Dumsor from 2012 to 2016 crippled the economy. It contributed to the lowest growth rate recorded in the past decade, the loss of jobs, reduced economic output, and the loss of consumer and investor confidence in the economy. Dumsor, Mr. Speaker, was also compounded by high electricity tariffs, increasing the cost of doing business in the country. Mr. Speaker, during the 2016 election campaign, His Excellency the President, Nana Akufo-Addo, promised Ghanaians that with prudent management of the economy, the MPP government would ensure that electricity tariffs are reduced. Mr. Speaker, the President promised Ghanaians that with prudent management of the economy, the MPP government will ensure that electricity tariffs are reduced. In fulfillment of this promise, Government, Mr. Speaker, has reviewed the tariff setting methodology and cost structure of power production. This review, Mr. Speaker, has resulted in recommendations that will be made to PURAS. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Order.
This review has resulted in recommendations that will be made to the PRC for consideration as per the law. In this regard, regard, Mr. Speaker.
Order.
In 2018, efforts will be geared towards keeping the lights on at affordable rates to consumers, particularly industries and small businesses, through reform and policy interventions over a 2-year period. The electricity tariff structure will be realigned with government's developmental goals of industrial transformation, growth, and job creation. To give relief to the poor, whose individual consumption actually falls in the subsidized lifeline category, but who lived in a compound house, the existing 4-tier tariff classification of residential consumers will be collapsed into lifeline and non-lifeline consumers in phases. On the basis of these interventions, if government's recommendations to PRC are accepted, consumers will be expected to benefit.
Honorable members, there will be order.
On the basis of these interventions,
every unparliamentary language, particularly, will be dealt with. There will be order. Honorable Minister, you continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the basis of these interventions, consumers will be expected to benefit from reductions in electricity tariffs. The expected average tariff reduction across various customer categories will be as follows. Average reduction for residential, 13%. Average reduction for non-residential, 13%. Special load tariff, low voltage, 13%. Special load tariff, medium voltage, 11%. Special load tariff, high voltage, 14%. This is industry. High voltage mines, 21%. Speaker.
Honorable Minister,
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, consistent. Mr. Speaker, improving domestic revenue mobilization. Mr. Speaker, consistent with government's objective of ensuring fiscal consolidation without compromising growth, as well as our resolve to consolidate our lower middle income status and move towards middle income status, and eventually wean ourselves from donor dependency, the need to significantly improve our domestic resource mobilization has become imperative. There is therefore the need to reverse the flat trend on tax to GDP ratios in the last few years. Mr. Speaker, in doing so, we will keep a balance across all sources of revenue and improve burden sharing across taxpayers using the most equitable and efficient administrative procedure and make the tax system more transparent and fair. Against the background, government will embark on the following measures to improve domestic resource mobilization. Create fiscal space by reducing budget rigidities. In this light, earmark funds capping realignment act that was passed last year to free resources for priority programs. Broaden the tax base to rope in more taxpayers into the tax net. The implementation of the national ID will be helpful. Improve tax compliance through the review of suspense regimes, special orders, use of fiscal electronic devices, implementation of the excise tax stamps, and the implementation of common reporting standard for exchange of information, among others. Strengthen the design and administration of property taxes, rationalize taxation of the mining sector. We intend to preserve while tackling discretionary. Examine, Mr. Speaker, order. Examine the design of our VAT systems and address any significant policy shortcomings that might be identified. Overhaul, Mr. Speaker, overhaul the exemption system to curtail large revenue losses which occur due to special regimes, reduced tax rates, and other exemptions which do not serve social or economic purpose and are exploited by insiders. Mr. Speaker, as these policy changes require careful study and preparations, we plan to come back to this august House in the course of 28 to make additional proposals, to make the requisite proposals for enactment of the appropriate laws to pave way for implementation. Mr. Speaker, government strategy to shift the focus of economic policy from taxation to production must necessarily come with greater need to tax base and ensure compliance. That's the only way to spread the national tax burden evenly across the population and lessen the tax burden on compliant taxpayers. Accordingly, in 2018, the following tax compliance measures, among others, will be applied with greater urgency. Reform of the customs suspense and transit regimes. The customs suspense regime permits importers to suspend payment of import duties because the imports are to be kept in bonded warehouses. There is evidence that these trade facilitation arrangements are being abused. To remedy this and reduce the risk to revenue, importers will be required to submit letters of credit, guarantees, or insurance cover from participating accredited financial institutions before their goods are warehoused. The duties paid on goods removed from the warehouses will be set off against the financial instrument. Further to this new policy, current defaulters will be required to settle all their arrears, including penalties, before they will be permitted to warehouse additional goods. The transit regime permits the clearing of transit goods without payment of duty. Modalities will be developed to ensure that transit importers pay the duties on imports in Ghana, which will be transferred to the designated destination country. Deployment of fiscal electronic device. The frequent audit of businesses has been a source of concern for the business community. In response to these concerns, government in 2018 will deploy fiscal electronic device to VAT-registered businesses. This will have the effect of VAT compliance and record keeping. Improving property tax collection. The Constitution enjoins MMDAs, Mr. Speaker, to mobilize revenue for provision of services. A major source of revenue is property tax, collection of which is low due to insufficient valuation capacity and the high cost of valuation. To enhance efficiency both in the valuation of properties and revenue collection process from this source, in 2018, GRA will collaborate with the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development to support the MMDAs in the assessment and collection of property taxes. Mr. Speaker, in the 2017 budget statement and economic policy, government stated its intention to use tax policy as a tool to stimulate investment and to shape economic behavior. In furtherance of this objective, the following policies will be introduced in 2018. 1.
Taxes. The collection of property
tax breaks to help position Ghana as a higher education hub. The education sector represents a high growth potential with multiplier effects on the economy as confirmed by a recent country private sector diagnostic study by the World Bank Group. This is also borne out by the rapid growth in privately owned and managed universities, as well as in the inward flow of students from the West Africa region and Africa. It is government's intention to support the sector in order to position Ghana as a premier higher education hub of the sub-region and in Africa, to attract critical foreign direct investment into the sector. In view of this, and also as part of government strategy for the long-term development of local human capital base, fit for a changing world, we will grant relief from corporate income tax paid by the privately owned and managed universities to the extent that profits are plowed back to expand or maintain the facilities. We would work to do the same for privately owned SHS in the near future. Tax incentives for young entrepreneurs. As a further commitment to creating a supportive ecosystem for young Ghanaian entrepreneurs of age 35 years and below who start their own businesses, government will, through the National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Plan, grant tax holidays based on the number of persons employed by a startup or early stage business. A preferential tax rate of between 3 to 5 years will be granted after the tax holiday. They will also be allowed to carry forward losses for 5 years. Income tax threshold. To protect low-income earners and ensure fairness in our income tax administration, government will review the current income tax threshold by pegging the tax-free threshold to the current minimum wage. In effect, government will abolish income taxes on the incomes of minimum wage earners. Taxation of lottery. The ongoing reform of the lotteries industry will continue, and the measures against illegal lottery business intensify. To remove the incentives for people to engage in illegal lottery, the 7.5 income tax on the commission of local marketing companies will be abolished, and the 5% withholding tax on the lotto prizes removed. Tax amnesty. In 2018, parliamentary approval will be sought to exempt taxpayers who register and file returns within a targeted period from paying penalties and interest for late submission of non-submission of returns and late payments. This includes exemptions from prosecution. GRA will, after the amnesty period, wage an intense campaign to prosecute continuing defaulters and offenders. Extension of National Fiscal Stabilization Levy and Special Import Levy. Mr. Speaker, Government continues to remove and reduce taxes both in 2017 and 2018 to support businesses and provide relief to individuals. Government is still committed to carrying out social interventions to improve the well-being of her citizens, especially the poor and the vulnerable. As such, Mr. Speaker, some tax handles have to be maintained in the short term as stabilization levy and the special import levy will be extended to the end 2019. Financial sector initiatives. Mr. Speaker, a strong and an efficient financial sector is fundamental to realizing Ghana beyond aid. This requires innovative and long-term financing instruments to support economic development for higher productivity, jobs, and inclusive growth. Mr. Speaker, to achieve this, Ghana will design the requisite financial architecture that is capable of mobilizing resources to help rapidly advance our country's development through the following. Mr. Speaker, we will launch a national development bank with the capacity to mobilize private capital towards agriculture and industrial transformation, among others. Government has set up a task force to develop a roadmap for its establishment. The expectation, Mr. Speaker, is to capitalize it with $500 million. Mr. Speaker, we will restructure the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, GIF, with the capability to mobilize foreign private capital for critical infrastructure development using a private sector model. Mr. Speaker, we intend to enhance the capacity of the Ghana Exim Bank to support agriculture and industrialization. Mr. Speaker, the financial sector of our country remains heavily dominated by banks. The total banking sector assets to GDP ratio as of September is 50%. Whilst that of the stock exchange to GDP ratio is 30%. Total corporate debt to GDP ratio is 36%. Mr. Speaker, all of this has to change to create a vibrant financial services sector to support our industrialization. Mr. Speaker, in effect, though, access to long-term funds by the private sector is not sufficient to drive accelerated economic growth of the country. To address this challenge, government will strengthen the pensions, insurance, and securities industries, which are the key agents of providing long-term capital for the economy. Mr. Speaker, the following specific reforms will aim to address some of these challenges in 2018. National pensions, insurance, and securities industry reform. Initiate reforms to the investment guidelines of pensions, insurance, and collective investment schemes to enable them support capital market growth. This reform will encourage banks to issue fixed income securities through the capital market instead of private placement in fixed deposits. Additionally, pensions and insurance firms will be encouraged to invest in private equity, real estate investment trusts, etc. National Informal Sector Pension Scheme. Mr. Speaker, the Cocoa Board Law 1984, Section 26, enjoined the Board of Directors of the Ghana Cocoa Board to establish a contributory pension scheme for the nation's cocoa, coffee, and shea nut farmers. In this regard, government has started a process of setting up a broader informal sector pension scheme under the third tier of the National Pension Scheme to cover cocoa farmers, amongst others. The framework to operationalize the scheme will be developed in 2018. Mr. Speaker, this scheme will complement the effort of private sector corporate trustees to provide social protection for a large segment of Ghanaians who are in the informal sector, especially our hard-working cocoa farmers. Establishment of an agriculture commodities exchange. Mr. Speaker, work on setting up the Ghana Commodity Exchange and warehouse receipt system has been ongoing for a decade. The exchange is expected to enable easy access to markets, fair pricing for smallholder farmers, and formalize informal agriculture trading activities. Government's priority is to operationalize the commodity exchange in 2018 to support agricultural transformation, including the planting for food and jobs. Mr. Speaker, development of housing and mortgage finance industry. Mr. Speaker, developing a vibrant mortgage and housing finance market is key for social equity and economic development and job creation. To support private sector efforts in expanding access to housing, the Ministry of Finance will partner with banks, pension trustees, and securities market players to start a process of developing and deepening the local mortgage and housing finance market to offer affordable mortgages at subsidized interest rate beginning of public sector workers. The policy objective is to reduce the cost of local currency mortgages offered by banks and to encourage the use of technology to lower the cost of housing by the private sector. This is expected to contribute to the reduction of Ghana's housing deficits, which currently stands at 1.7 million. Positioning Ghana as a regional financial services hub. Over the past decades, Ghana has positioned itself as a pillar of stability in the sub-region, with relatively strong institutions and entrenched democracy. Government intends to capitalize on the success by positioning Ghana as a regional financial services hub. Mr. Speaker, positioning Ghana as an international financial services center is intended to make Ghana the preferred headquarters for all international banks operating in the sub-region and in Africa. Ghana also becoming the hub for the financial technology and payment systems for the region. The hub is also intended to host the international private equity and venture capital firms to support entrepreneurship and access to long-term capital by the private sector in the sub-region. Mr. Speaker, a special task force will be set up to provide government with a strategy and framework for the establishment of Ghana as a regional financial services hub. Mr. Speaker, provision of health services is essential for a productive economy. The National Health Insurance Scheme exists to ensure that citizens obtain quality health care at all times. Mental health is also of paramount importance to government. Studies have indicated that the current revenue sources do not guarantee the sustainability of the fund, given that enrollment to the scheme has increased over the years. To ensure sustainability of the scheme, there is a need to review the sources of funding to increase the revenue flow into the fund. We will consult the relevant stakeholders and make proposals based on such consultations. Voluntary Education Fund. Mr. Speaker, with the successful launch of free SHS, government has received proposals from the public, several of which encourage the establishment of a fund to receive voluntary contribution to support education. Thankfully, Mr. Speaker, the GET Fund law allows for the setting up of other education-related funds. In 2018, the Ministry will work with GET Fund to set up these education funds to enable Ghanaians make voluntary contributions to support educational institutions and also facilitate stakeholder ownerships in strong senior high school institutions. Promoting economic opportunities for women. Mr. Speaker, empowering women and achieving gender equality is fundamental to the realization of our SDG goals. The President is committed to empowering women and creating opportunities for their participation in the job and wealth creation agenda. In order to promote economic opportunities for women, special consideration will be given to women in government procurement. Mr. Speaker, we have very good reasons to be optimistic about our country again. Government has shown and will continue to demonstrate through its actions that the welfare of the Ghanaian is paramount. Plans to restore and sustain faith with Ghanaians and external partners. This is evident in our decision to complete the IMF ECF program at the end of December 2018, and will ensure that all targets are met. Mr. Speaker, we would like to assure Ghanaians that the government of President Nana Akufo-Addo is a government which delivers on its promises. Mr. Speaker, we would like to assure Ghanaians that the government of President Nana Akufo-Addo delivers on its promises. We promised to implement a free senior high school policy, and we have delivered. We promised to restore nursing training allowances, and we have. We promised to restore teacher training allowances, and we have. We promised to end doomsday, and we have. We promise to reduce fertilizer prices by 50%. And we have delivered. We promise, Mr. Speaker, to establish a Ministry of Zongo and Inner City Affairs, and we have delivered. Mr. Speaker, we promise to increase and pay peacekeeping allowances, increase from $31 to $35, and we have delivered. Mr. Speaker, we promise a stimulus package to support local industry, and we are delivering. Mr. Speaker, we promise to implement a national entrepreneurship and innovation plan, and we have delivered. Mr. Speaker, we promise a more efficient port system, and we have delivered. Mr. Speaker, we promise to reduce the rapid rate of borrowing and accumulation. Mr. Speaker, we promise to reduce Mr. Speaker, we promise to restore economic growth, and we have delivered. We promise to reduce interest rates, and we have delivered. We promise to improve Ghana's sovereign credit rating, and we have delivered. We promise to enhance fiscal discipline in the management of our economy, and we have delivered. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we promised. Mr. Speaker.
Order. Order, honorable members.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, order.
Mr. Speaker, we promise to reduce taxes. And we have delivered. Mr. Speaker, we promise to stay current on its statutory obligations like NHIS, DACF, Get Funds, SNIT, and we are delivering. Mr. Speaker, we promise a national digital property address system, and we are delivering. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker,
Order.
we promise to institute measures to deal with corruption, including the Office of Special Cooperation. Mr. Speaker, including the Office of Special Prosecutor, and they have delivered. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we promise to issue national ID cards, and we are delivering. We promise to establish a Zongo Development Fund, and we are delivering. Mr. Speaker, we promise to establish 3 development authorities, Northern, Middle Belt, and Coastal, and they have delivered. As vehicles for the allocation of the 1 million per constituency, and we intend to deliver this year. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Honorable members who are getting on their feet. Honorable. Don't get on your feet. Honorable members, it is most unparliamentary for me to see members on their feet in that manner. We are going to have your say.
Mrs.
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker.
Order. In Parliament, one person will stand at a time. The person who stands in the meantime is the Honorable Minister for Finance. Honorable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we promised to revive the collapsed railway sector, and we are delivering. Mr. Speaker, we promise. Mr. Speaker, we promise to reduce electricity tariffs, and we are on course to deliver. Mr. Speaker, we promise to implement a strategy to curb the menace of Galamsey, and we are delivering. Mr. Speaker, we promise to pursue policies that will create jobs in the economy, and we are delivering. Mr. Speaker, Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, we have fulfilled our promises. Mr. Speaker, in my debut appearance in this august house, my backbencher friends across the aisle traded Bible quotations with me. As I invoked the miracle of Jesus feeding the 5,000 with 5 loaves of bread, Matthew 13, they responded, Mr. Speaker, with Philippians 4:19, that my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. 4:19. Mr. Speaker, with the little, Mr. Speaker, with the little we inherited from the Mahama government, our performance these 10 months are indeed nothing less. Mr. Speaker, with the little we inherited from the Mahama government, our performance these 10 months are indeed nothing less than a miracle. Nothing less than a miracle. As evidenced by the blessings and achievements I've just enumerated. I can only add, Mr. Speaker, that the combination of Philippians 4:19 and Matthew 13, hard work and obedience, have greatly benefited our dear country. Mr. Speaker, going forward, as I mentioned, this budget is about putting Ghana back to work. And in as much as we have delivered this year, by the grace of God, we will massively deliver on jobs this year. Mr. Speaker, planting for food and jobs, 700 million. Stimulus package for industrialization, 236 million. Zongo Development Fund, 100 million. Development authorities, 1.26 billion. Entrepreneurship and innovation, 50 million. Akufo-Addo plan, Mr. Speaker, Nation Builders Corps, 600 million. National ID, 200 million. Positioning Ghana as a regional financial hub, a multi-billion-dollar industry. Integrated bauxite aluminium, 2 billion. Mr. Speaker, the Akufo-Addo plan for economic transportation, 1,600 kilometers of road, 500 million. Bridges, GESEL, 400 million cedis, Mr. Speaker, of agricultural financing. Mr. Speaker, in addition to this, IDA credit of $100 million for labor and jobs. Another IDA credit of $150 million, Mr. Speaker, for bank credit to support entrepreneurs and industrialization. Mr. Speaker, I would just like to state, Mr. Speaker, that jobs are here. Ejuma Riba, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, with your kind permission, I would like, Mr. Speaker, to present to you the Ejuma budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, in accordance with Standing Order 4140 sub 3, and within such time that the Business Committee may determine, debate on the motion shall stand adjourned for not less than 3 days. I direct that part of the budget which relates to the ministries or constitutional bodies shall stand referred to the responsible committees on the matter for consideration and subsequent report, according to Order 140 sub 4. Any part of the budget which relates to finance shall stand committed to the Finance Committee of Parliament for relevant consideration and report, according to Standing Order 140 sub 5. Honourable Majority Leader.
Speaker, as you have just said, we've heard a motion from the Minister responsible for finance on behalf of the President of the Republic seeking the approval of the financial policy of government for the year ending 31st December 2018. Mr. Speaker, to reiterate, when such a motion is moved, that this House approve the financial policy of the government for the year ending, as you have seen in this case, December 31st, 2018, debate on it shall stand adjourned for not less than 3 days. In the circumstance, Mr. Speaker, I would beg to move that this House stands adjourned and reconvene tomorrow at 10 in the forenoon. Mr. Speaker, I so move.
Order. Honorable Minority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, very well, as guided by you, I'm familiar with the rules of this House, and pursuant to Order 140, it's only natural that I perform that simple task of seconding the motion for adjournment. But, Mr. Speaker, having listened to the Finance Minister, whose revenue after paperless is 35% compared to the Vice 56%. Mr. Speaker, we have heard his shopping list of realizable and unrealizable pledges and promises. A challenge wage bill with additional 100,000 jobs for graduates. Very welcome. He has not inherited but has provided electricity.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, this is
Honorable Majority Leader. Do rise.
The rules are clear. 3 days.
Mr. Speaker.
No, 3 days.
My colleague, the Minority Leader.
Honorable Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker.
Some of your colleagues on my left side want you to taste a bit of your own nice medicine.
Mr. Speaker, I'm familiar with the chorus from my colleagues. The Minority Leader started by saying that he's familiar with the rules of the House. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, I'll draw his attention to relevance when a motion has been moved, because he started by saying that he's aware of the rules of the House. So may I draw his attention to the relevance of this task that he is engaging in. If he wants to second the motion, may he be invited to second the motion. If he is not minded to second the motion, Mr. Speaker, there are others in the House who are minded and purpose to do that. As for the debate, Mr. Speaker, we are ever ready to debate. And Mr. Speaker, let me assure that it will not be on commentary, it will be on relevance and substance.
Order. Honorable Minority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we have seconded the motion. If this is a turnaround economy, the battle is the Lord's. I second the motion.
Honorable members, the motion for adjournment has been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Those against say no. ayes have it. And the House will stand adjourned to tomorrow, 10 o'clock in the forenoon. Thank you very much.